Now that you have a basic understanding of what title insurance is and what it does, the next question that needs to be answered is probably how. How do we issue title insurance? How is it ordered? And what are the steps involved in our searching, reporting, and insuring a piece of property? The first step in the title insurance process is the application. The information on the application is always provided to the title company by our client, normally after a contract of sale has been executed. The title insurance application provides us with all of the information that we need in order to run a complete search of the back chain of title. The most crucial piece of information on the application is the property location, which includes the county, the street address, and whenever possible, the block and lot designation. Without the specifics of exactly what property we are searching, it is impossible to abstract and examine the back chain of title. Even simple mistakes, such as the inversion of two numbers on the address or the incorrect suffix on a street, saying Grand Avenue instead of Grand Drive, for instance, can result in an examination and report being done on a completely wrong piece of property. Another vital piece of information related to the search are the names of the purchasers and sellers. These names must be run for judgments, liens, and any other encumbrances that attach to real property. Therefore, incomplete, misspelled, or missing party names will result in an incomplete or improper lien search, which may end up missing legitimate liens against the property. Furthermore, if the names of the sellers on the application do not match the owners listed in the public records, it will raise questions and cause complications that must be raised in the title report. For example, if an application is received in which John Smith is listed as the seller and Mike Brown as the buyer, the title company's initial search will include names run against John Smith and Mike Brown. Now assume that John Smith has a wife named Mary Smith, who was not included on the application. Judgments and liens against Mary's name, which would attach to any real property that she owns, will not be turned out in our initial search, and therefore represent a very real potential liability on the part of the title company. Furthermore, after the title is examined and it is discovered that John and Mary Smith purchased the property together, the examiner would then have to begin an investigation to try to determine what happened to Mary. Since Mary is still alive and well and involved in the transaction, a lot of time would be wasted and unnecessary exceptions raised in order to answer a question that could have been avoided if her name was included on the application. The remainder of the information on the application is equally necessary in order for us to issue a policy. However, not all of that information needs to be provided right away. Oftentimes, details such as the bank's name, the bank attorney, the mortgage amount, and sometimes even the purchase price might not be finalized at the time that the title report is ordered, and might therefore be listed as TBD on the initial application. On the other hand, pieces of information that may seem trivial, such as the survey instructions, the property classification, and the municipals to order, are actually quite important to have up front, as they determine how the file will be handled, what kinds of searches will be ordered, and the time periods that need to be examined. The next step in the title process is the abstract and examination of the back chain. We say abstract and examination because in many ways these two job functions have merged. Abstractors today not only create shorthand summaries of all the documents of records, but also point out obvious issues that can be found in the chain. For instance, an abstractor will make notations if there is a break in the chain, an apparent death with no proofs, a missing assignment of mortgage, or other obvious title issues. The modern examiner does not, however, issue an opinion as to the final state of the title. That is a function that has been overridden by the issuance of a preliminary title report, which is now a function of the title agency's reading department. The compilation of an abstract takes a great deal of research and therefore a reasonable amount of time. Traditionally, examination of a back chain of title required a trip to the county clerk's office, where the examiner must search through large books containing official copies of all recorded documents. These books are called libers, and specific documents are identified by the number of the liber in which they are found and the page numbers on which they are located. A deed for a specific piece of property in Nassau County, therefore, would be indexed against the block and lot and described as the document in Liber 20031, page 45. Some counties replaced libers with reels of microfilmed copies, but the process was still essentially the same. Needless to say, the process of locating and examining documents under these recording systems is time-consuming, and a full search often takes several days. However, in the past 10 years, technology has begun to play a large part in the recording systems of many counties. In New York City, recorded documents as far back as the 1960s are now searchable and available for viewing online. This makes the examination process faster and easier because the research can be done from any place with a computer and internet access. Because the records only go back 50 years, there are limits to what kinds of property searches can be done online. But if someone is buying or refinancing a piece of residential property that has had reasonable activity over the years, an online search can normally be performed. McGregor employs in-house examiners whose primary function is to abstract the back chains of such titles. An in-house examination is normally finished within a day or two, as opposed to 3 to 5 days for searches that must be sent out to our other examiners. After the abstract is completed and delivered to our office, it must be read. To read an abstract is more than simply looking at the documents. A title reader must take all of the information provided by an examiner, look at the whole picture, identify all of the potential risks involved in the title, and generate a title report based on his or her findings. This is a highly technical and complicated process, and true proficiency requires years of training. Reading titles requires an understanding of multiple areas of the law, touching on numerous subjects including real estate, tenancy, marriage, death, heirship, bankruptcy, liens and foreclosures, taxes, trusts, and businesses, just to name a few. A title reader must first be able to recognize that there is a potential problem, and then determine the implications of that problem. Once the risks have been assessed and determined to be significant, the reader must raise an exception within the title report which explains what the problem is and what must be done to fix it or clear the title. The end result of a reader's work is the creation of a title report. The report, which is also known as a binder, is actually a commitment to issue a policy in the future. We will be explaining reports in greater detail at a later time, but generally speaking, the report should include specifics concerning the parties involved in the transaction, a detailed description of the property being insured, and a list of exceptions, also known as a Schedule B, that adequately address all of the potential title issues that must be cleared up prior to closing. Any exceptions that are not adequately addressed will either keep the title from closing or be carried over and included as exceptions to coverage in the final title policy. Once the report is completed and sent out to the client and the other parties involved in the transaction, the reader's job is done. Once a title report has been issued, the next step is to clear up the exceptions that are listed in the Schedule B. Clearing a title, like reading one, is a technical job and requires a different but similar level and type of title expertise. While a reader must recognize an issue and know how to raise the proper exceptions, a clearance officer must be able to examine the exceptions, recognize the underlying issues, and then determine what proofs must be provided or what steps must be taken in order to clear the exception or reduce the risk to the point that it can be omitted from the report. Out of all the people in the production system, the clearance officer spends the most time on the phone with the clients solving title problems. The customer service department fields all phone calls and handles many of the minor changes and basic amendments to the title, but it is the clearance officer who is responsible for the serious title issues. Most attorneys, especially those who have little real estate experience, rely on the clearance officer to guide them through the process of clearing the report. The clearance officer is also very involved in the closing, communicating with the company's closer to make sure that the deal is cleared correctly. In some title companies, the reading and clearance functions are combined into a single position. Because of the nature of the two roles, they lend themselves to combination more than other positions. They both require the same knowledge base, the same level of expertise, and the same familiarity with title exceptions. Both positions require a degree of title understanding that allows them to make knowledge-based judgment calls and risk assessment decisions. However, at other companies, including McGregor, while the readers and clearance officers do work together in the same department, they remain separate job functions. The closing is the big event at which everything takes place. A closing occurs when the purchasers, the sellers, the bank, and their attorneys, together with a title closer from the insurance company, all get together to close the transaction. Hooray! At the closing, the seller executes the deed, giving the property to the purchaser. The seller's mortgage is normally paid off. The purchaser normally takes out a new mortgage. Money is distributed to the appropriate parties. All of the necessary documents are signed. Final proofs are provided to clear up exceptions, and the title insurance policy is issued. Many title companies don't actually provide final copies of their policies at the closing. They mail them out after the file has been received back from the closer and processed. McGregor, however, almost always has original policies available for the purchaser and lender at the closing table. The title company is represented at the closing by an individual called a closer. Closers are often independent contractors who work on a per-closing basis with multiple title companies. Some agencies or underwriters employ in-house closers who work exclusively for the one company. McGregor does not employ any closers, but has relationships with dozens of closers who work for us on a per-closing basis. The closer's job is to represent the interests of the title company at the closing. It is the closer's primary responsibility to make sure that any title issues that have not been cleared before closing are disposed of before the policy is issued. He or she is also responsible to check proofs of identification to make sure that documents are executed correctly, to act as a notary where acknowledgments are necessary, and to collect the correct title fees, including premiums, recording fees, and taxes from the proper parties. Once the closing is completed, the closer gathers up their marked up title report, the newly executed documents, escrow agreements, copies of IDs, and other clearance proofs, and the money that they've collected from the closing, and brings it all back to the title company. Even after a file has closed, there is still work to be done. The marked up reports, documents, and money must be collected from the closer. Money must be accounted for and deposited into the correct accounts, and the documents must be checked and submitted for recording. One of the final responsibilities of the title insurance company after the issuance of the policy is to ensure that the deed, mortgage, or other documents are recorded in the correct county against the correct property and in a timely manner. This may seem like a simple enough process, but the truth is that the intricacies of each county's recording systems, rates, and supporting documents requires a certain degree of expertise that only comes with experience. Documents that are prepared and signed at the closing must be checked to make sure they were filled out in a manner that will be accepted by the county. Rules about signatures, acknowledgments, addresses, cover pages, and supporting documents vary from county to county. Therefore, each title's document must be treated with care. Recording fees and associated taxes, which are different in each county, must be calculated. Checks must be cut to the appropriate government agencies, and then the documents can be submitted for recording. The recording process is a long one. Many counties in New York are 4 to 6 months behind in their recording process, which means that a deed that is submitted in January might not be recorded until as late as June. The recording department at the title company or agency must maintain a file as open until they receive the recording information of the document, the CRFN number of liber and page where it is indexed. If there is a problem with a document, it will be rejected by the county, which means that it will be sent back to the title company for corrections. When this happens, the document must be corrected and then resubmitted for recording, which makes the process even longer. It is not until a document has actually been recorded by the county that the recording department job is done. However, there have been exciting recent developments in the document recording process which have drastically reduced the time it takes for certain documents to be recorded. In certain counties, including New York City and Nassau County, documents can now be submitted and paid for electronically. Documents submitted this way are processed and recorded in a matter of days or weeks rather than months. This not only shortens the amount of time that a title company has to keep open files after closing, it also reduces the risk of future claims that can result from certain types of fraud. Imagine, for instance, that an unscrupulous homeowner decides to sell his home. Imagine that he finds 3 separate purchasers and agrees to sell his house to all 3 of them individually. He enters into 3 separate contracts of sale, and 3 potential new owners order title insurance, go to closing, and receive deeds from the homeowner without ever knowing of each other's existence. The title companies who examine the back chain of title would have little chance of discovering this fraud in time, even if the closings happened weeks or even months apart. The unscrupulous man would have plenty of time to commit his fraud and then disappear, having collected payment for his house 3 times over. With the new, faster recording systems in place, it will be much more difficult for such deceitful individuals to perpetrate such crimes. With a window of only a few days instead of several months in which to work, the homeowner would have a much higher chance of being discovered by one or all of the title insurance companies before he could steal the purchaser's money. As soon as the documents from the first closing were recorded, the second and third title companies would have evidence that a problem existed and would be able to prevent their clients from spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on nothing. The process of issuing a title insurance policy is a long and complex one, involving many different people with different specialized skill sets. The constant improvement of technologies makes certain parts of the process faster and easier to complete, but there is no technological advancement that can replace the expertise that comes with years of hands-on experience in the title business.